Hello everyone and welcome back to LA, and to potentially my biggest build of the entire series, the Los Angeles International Airport, more commonly known as LAX. This is a build which I have had planned since before episode 1, with LA10 being LAX. It kind of felt like the right episode to build this. Now every video since Venice Beach we've been working towards this goal, building out the city in the direction of the airport, knowing that I had to get here by episode 10. Now there's a few milestones for this video, of course with episode 10, we're at last hitting double figures for the LA series, and I've also just hit 20,000 subscribers here on YouTube, which still feels a bit mad. Thank you all for the support you've given me over the last 2 years, and for all of the likes and comments, and for hitting that subscribe button. It's very much appreciated. And seeing as this is, I guess, my 20,000 subscriber special, I'm going to be giving away 2 signed prints for my LA series to 2 of you. All you need to do to be in with a chance of winning one of these signed prints is to make sure you're subscribed and like and comment on this video. It'll be the same for the next video, part 2, so commenting on both videos you will have an extra chance, and then I'll announce the winners in the final video, part 3. So this build, with all of the work which has gone into it, it will need to be split into 3 videos. So part 1 will be the layout of the airport, the runways and taxiways, and all of the details for them, the markings, the line work, the signage, the lighting. This was a very lengthy process indeed. Part 2 will be the creation of the inner loop and the surrounding area of the airport. Part 3 will then be the terminal buildings and the aprons and gates for the airport. I hope you will enjoy seeing this all come together, and will stick around to watch the entire thing. So I've actually been working on this project for probably around 3 months now. It's been by far the biggest and most technically challenging build I've done to date, and has required a lot of learning about airports. My knowledge was fairly limited, and I have done my best to make it as accurate as possible. It wasn't only the build which took me 3 months, but also the creation of new assets. So a few days ago I've released over 100 airport assets on PDX mods, my Airport Essentials pack. This will provide hopefully all of the essential tools you will need to detail your own airports, a variety of decals, surfaces and net lanes, all of which you will see me integrate into this build. So please go download them on PDX mods and have a lot of assets to detail up your own airport. You'll also notice on the mod page are some other beautiful airport images by 2 other creators. So a shout out first to Chengzi, who has created this absolute monster of an airport, and he did such a beautiful job with it. He also kindly shared with me some of his airport assets which he made in Editor 2, the gangways and air bridges. He has made these available to download as a local asset on my Discord if you want them. And also to Booty Alex, who has created more of a regional desert theme airport to inspire you, completely different in style to LAX. Now if you haven't seen Booty's work before, his town Los Vagos, it's probably one of the best builds and most creative which I've seen in CS2. Booty regularly streams on Twitch, so go show him some support. But he showcased his airport build on Twitch just a few days ago, so there should still be a VOD online for you to check out his build. I also want to give a huge shout out to StarQ and Harbourmaster Jay, who have both contributed massively to this project. Without their work and dedication, this build probably wouldn't have been nearly as cool or as realistic. The whole functionality of the airport, how lively and how busy it is, this is all thanks to the legend StarQ. And in episodes 2 and 3, you will see how we were able to achieve this. And of course, the wonderful creations of Harbourmaster Jay, who has again created some beautiful assembly assets for LAX, which I'm sure you'll agree they're just absolutely stunning. And lastly, if you enjoy the video and appreciate all of the work and effort which has gone into it, I would really appreciate it if you would take a moment to like and comment on the video. And if you like what I do and would like me to continue creating the best possible content, consider supporting me through Patreon or YouTube memberships. The links are in the description, and a big thank you to those of you who are doing so already. So here's the city following the end of episode 9, where we built some specialised industry with a recreation of the LA oil fields. And this city, I'd say, it's now big enough where I guess we can actually justify adding in an airport. So we have this space here, right up against the edge of the playable area. You may actually remember back in episode 5, I did slightly make the marina a little smaller, knowing that eventually I would need just a little bit more room for the airport. And just like I did with the oil fields, where the original location of the oil fields were just outside the playable area, and I slightly moved the position inside the playable area, we're going to do the same with LAX. So you can actually see the real world location here. And you know, it's just a small move, just to get it inside of the playable area, so I think it makes sense geographically. But if you look at the space here, we have only maybe half the size or less of the real airport to work with, so some sacrifices are going to need to be made to fit it all in. Before we get into it, let's just have a quick look at Google Earth at LAX. You can see the real thing, and you can see just how big it is. LAX actually has 4 runways. I'm only going to be creating 3, just due to the space we have available. Now, LAX is one of the busiest airports in the world, serves over 75 million passengers each year. It actually has like over 1,000 flights every single day, which is just an insane amount of flights thinking about it. There's 9 terminal buildings with different airliners operating in each one, and they're all connected by this inner loop. I will show all of this in more detail when I come to build them in the later videos. There's also additional areas just away from the main terminal building, which I guess are more admin and maintenance parts of the airport. I think this is potentially a cargo area, or at least for my builds, I will be making this the cargo area. This video I will be mostly focusing on the overall layout, the runways and the taxiways. Google Earth has obviously been a major assistance during this project, seeing all of the markings and details close up, which also saved the headache of trying to figure this all out myself, what all of the lines and markings mean. Essentially I could just copy the real versions to provide accuracy. The green colour shoulders to the runways and taxiways, they're very prominent in LAX. I think more so here and perhaps in other airports, but they are commonly used in other airports too. I also notice how the surface isn't all one colour. There's lots of areas which have been patched over, replaced with asphalt or concrete. That makes the surface look a bit more interesting, I think, so I'd really like to recreate that. Okay, so now we've had just a quick look around LAX. I will come back to it as we go through. But let's get started, and I'm going to flatten out the entire area for the airport. And I'll start with measuring up all of the runways and taxiways. So this is my final iteration of the airport layout you're seeing. I did do a quick test off camera just to measure everything up, see how much room I had for what I needed. And I'm just going to use roads initially to measure up the runways and taxiways, just for convenience, and to ensure I have the right distances and angles in place. So to assist with getting all of my angles correct, I'm also using some measuring net lanes and surfaces. These were shared locally on my Discord by Kelvin, and I did make a few adjustments to his original assets as I needed them on a much bigger scale for an airport. So I actually end up rotating the direction of the airport and the runways just to be on a slight angle from the edge of the playable area. This will actually give us a bit more space to work with for the airport. This angle is more like the real version of LAX, with the runways pointing out to the ocean. On this scale, over a few kilometers in size, Even if you make a road at what you think is 90 degrees, it might not always end up bang on 90 degrees. Could end up being 89.5 or 90.5 in the end, just a half a degree off. So these measuring tools will help ensure the accuracy of all of my angles. So the LAX runways IRL, I think they're about 3 to 4 kilometers in length. Now we don't have that amount of space, so I'm going to go in at around 2 to 3 kilometers for mine. That's about the most we can fit in, which is still plenty, much bigger in comparison to the vanilla airport assets. So the runways will be 60 meters in width. This is the same as they are in real life. The taxiways will be a bit thinner than the runways, 36 meters in width. And the width of these gaps in between the runways and taxiways will be the same. So technically speaking, I think this is a bit too close in distance between runways and taxiways. IRL, I think there would be a bit more distance in between them. But as we are limited by space, like I said earlier, some sacrifices did need to be made. So the layout is done now, at least made out of roads until I can create it all properly. But the dimensions and the angles, they're all about right now and will leave plenty of room for the terminal buildings and the inner loop of the airport. So let's use the first of some of my new assets from my new Airport Essentials pack on PDX mods. So the first assets are a set of 4 surfaces made to match the surface used on LAX. And I think it fits the airport look well. There's a few colours and different patterns for the mixed colour variations, which should help just to avoid any repetition of the texture when viewed from a distance. Each slab is 6 meters wide, so it will be a perfect fit for a 60 meter wide runway, just like the IRL version. So let's apply all of these to the runways and taxiways. Okay, surface is in, and now I'm going to add all of the line work and markings to the runway. So before I apply them to the build, I'm going to show you the order of how these should be applied to the runways. So first up, there's 2 versions of the runway to use on net lanes, and there's a version both with and without the centre line. So I'm going to draw out a section of the runway with the centre line along the majority of the distance of the runway. Then at either end of the runway, we're just going to need a short section of the runway without the centre line. This is where we'll add things like the runway number. So it's up to you how long you will make the runways. Mine for LAX, I think they're either 2.4 kilometers or 3.2 kilometers, some in real life are even longer. We can then apply the decals, and I'll start from the end. So on either end you normally have a blast pad. This is just like an overrun area in case a plane for whatever reason cannot stop in time. Actually, I'm not going to go through what each and every signal marking means, but I will try and give you just a brief overview. So next is the displaced threshold area. Now this doesn't appear on every runway. You can see LAX has some runways with this part and runways without. This is mainly only used for taxiing onto the runway for takeoff, and I guess not officially part of the main runway. They are represented by single arrows in the centre at incremental distances, and then 4 arrows together at the end. Next is the runway threshold bar and the runway threshold. These are the start and end points of the main section of runway. Then we have the runway number and designation. So the runway number is actually based on the magnetic heading, the angle on a compass compared to north. So for LAX, I just copied what they used, but in theory, 25 is a 250-degree angle from north, and 7 is a 70-degree angle from north, so they are 180 degrees apart. You'll see up until this point I've used the runway net lane without the centre line, but after the runway number we'll now use the version with the centre line. So these next markings are touchdown zone markings. The first one I'm placing has 3 lines on either side. Then is the runway aim point markings. This is where the pilot would aim for to touch down their wheels. Then the remaining touchdown zone markings with the 2 lines on either side and then the 1. So that's all of the runway markings for one side. It repeats in exactly the same way for the other side, just changing the runway number to the value 180 degrees from the first one. There's of course, a lot more to runways with all of the signage and lighting we'll need, but we'll come back to that later in the video. So now, I'll apply that process to my LAX runways. Okay, so next up is the runway and taxiway shoulders. So like I showed earlier, they're very prominent in LAX. The taxiways have the green shoulders and the runways have grey. Technically these ones are angled, mine are just straight, but they are close enough I think. So these will go directly on top of the road networks which I used to measure the runways. Once added, I can then remove the roads and tidy up the surfaces around them. And it's a whole lot of the same process, to be honest, and I think it's the same with a lot of this build. So, I am just going to be showing you a little bit of each step so you can learn and see how I use the assets. But, consider what I'm showing you is just a very small amount of footage compared to, how much time each step took. Applying this to the entire airport was a very lengthy process, due to the scale of the airport. So the shoulders are all in, and now I'll get started on the line work. So I've created 5 different net lanes for these based on what I found in LAX and from guides and explainers I found online. These net lanes for taxiway centre lanes, taxiway and runway holding positions, and ILS critical areas. But luckily for LAX, I can simply copy what I see on Google Earth. This should make it as accurate as possible. That means, I didn't really have to dive in to what each and every line meant and know exactly where to place them. I could just copy what I see. Now, I'm actually building these intersections slightly away from the taxiways. You can see I've set up like a template to assist me. This will ensure they have the right angles. And once created, I'll just drag the net lanes into the correct position on the taxiway. There's also these red and white signs for the runway direction and numbers. I've created these, complete for LAX just to save a bit of time. But I have supplied these all as individual parts, as individual numbers, so you can customize them to your specific runway numbers if you want. And how cool is this looking, by the way? The lines are really adding so much detail to the build already. Another detail which took a pretty long time to add to the entire airport. Maybe this was an entire day or longer just getting in all of these lines. And again, it's kind of the same thing repeated, so I'm going to limit how much I'm showing you, but it's mostly the same viewing the reference image on Google Earth, matching the line work on top of my template, and then dragging it into the right position and connecting it all up. But I think the extra effort to apply all of this really was worth it after seeing the final result. So that's most of the line work all done now, and it's looking super good I think, really adds a lot to the overall look. So next up is lighting. Now for this I can't use Google Earth, so instead this did require a bit of learning about the lights and when to use the different lighting colours. But the runways are mostly white and red, with yellow lights at the sides at the start and end. Then the taxiways are blue on the outside and green in the middle. When the taxiway meets the runway, it alternates between green and yellow. So these coloured lights were all created by Jay, and like all of his other assets I'll be using for LAX, are available locally on my Discord. The spacing between the lights is slightly different depending on which light, but commonly they are either 60 meters or 30 meters apart. You can see here I actually turned to the measuring surface again to help get them all evenly spaced, and it's such a useful asset for situations like this. And again, these lights are just they just look super cool. Completely change the overall look at night. Such a great addition to the build. As part of the Airport Essentials pack, I've also created net lanes for service roads, and there's 2 different styles and sizes, and a single line version of each of them too. So I'll add in the first surface road, and this is in the same position as it is in real life. I'm also combining this with El Gendo's vanilla asphalt net lanes, so they appear on top of the taxiways and shoulders. So next up, I'm going to add in a bit of detail, make the grassy areas feel a bit more unique. So I did start off with probably my normal go-to, the Real Vision decals, but in this case I wasn't quite feeling it. I felt it was a bit complicated. Instead, it was around this time, it was a few months ago now, that Gaga XM dropped some really great grass surfaces on PDX mods. It did a really great job with these, and I love how they're designed to work in layers too. you can combine many different surfaces into one to create something a bit more unique. They look great, really capture the vibe I was looking for the grass in and around LAX, very similar to how it is on Google Earth. I do add in some real visions to the edges, just to give it a bit more of a sandy, dry look. Although, later I do actually tone this down a little. I think it was maybe a little too much in hindsight. I also add in a bunch of sunken foliage like grass sprites. You've seen me do this before. So like I showed earlier, the LAX surface of the airport, it isn't entirely tiles. There's lots of areas which are patched over, some asphalt, some concrete. And so yeah, I'm going to add in a bunch of these using Elgendo's packs again. And same as in pretty much most episodes of mine, I'll be adding some stains and leakage. But I will be making them a bit more subtle, this time lowering them into the ground using the EDT transform tool. But this bit of wear and tear, it really adds a lot to the realism. I think everything was just a bit too clean before. For the runway, you can see how dark these stains and tyre marks can get in real life. Of course, we have lots of planes flying constantly and the tyres are skidding down the runway. I'm going to have to do something similar, and I'll use the prop line tool for this just to make it easier. I think I actually might have seen infrastructurists do this a few months back. Actually works pretty well, makes it a lot more easier to complete it too. It's pretty mad to see how many airport builds have dropped on YouTube these last few months. Definitely feels like airport season for Cities Skylines 2 at the moment. I guess with the new mods we have the introduction of airport functionality thanks to StarQ, and the fact that the game has been out quite a while now. All of our cities are quite large and I guess can justify adding in an airport. But there's been a lot of great builds and inspiration, and it's been great to see all of the different approaches. So that's mostly all done with the runways and taxiways. There is a few more bits to include, but for now I'm going to move on to something else. Also, mainly just for my own sanity too, because I guess it's been quite a grueling and tedious process. Probably many days just to this point. And I guess at this stage, I just need to do something a bit different and take my mind off these runways. Here you can see me just building out the area on the coast, similar to how it is in real life with the sand dunes. I'm not putting in too much effort with any of this. It's only really going to be seen in the background, but I will still give it a little bit of attention. But I am just going to fly through a lot of these parts super quickly for you, give you a brief glimpse into them. So to finish off today's episode, I'm going to build out the rest of these more admin and maintenance areas. So this area in LAX kind of looks just like an overflow area. There's an apron here with stands for different aircrafts, and also the cargo airport. This will also allow me to quickly show you some of the other remaining assets included in my new asset pack, even though they will be featured much more in the later episodes. So one building which I use repeatedly in this build and here now is the harbour asset. And I'm using the Statik Ploppables non-functional version. It's really got that airport kind of feel. And then I'll add some of these new decals around the harbour asset, ones which came with my pack. So there's two airplane stands, a large and medium version, which fit the vanilla plane props. And I can line them up right against each other with Move It and shuffle everything into the right position. Again, I'm going to use my service road net lanes, which you've seen me use a few times now, and create a path along the sides of the building. These are a little fiddly to put in, especially using them in combination with the pavement net lanes, but they are important to include. In a later video, I will actually add buses to some of these service roads just to give a bit of life to them. In Find It, there's of course a bunch of airplane props we can use, both larger and smaller ones. And with the recolor mod, we can also change their appearance. I think the introduction of a bit of colour just gives them a bit of life. But in a later episode, I do actually change them to Nyoko's new Right Everywhere assets, as you've seen in my cinematic shots. Next up, I'm adding in Chengzi's jet bridges and gangways, which he created in Editor. Just using vanilla props, but they came out super cool, I think. So I raised them up 3 meters in the air using Anarchy's elevation tool, and I can just create a path from the plane to the building. So there's 2 different sizes in legs, and also a version to connect directly to the plane. They come out pretty cool, give it a very unique look, which I absolutely love. So since I released the trailer video just a few days ago, I've actually already had 2 comments about these jet bridges, how they should only be placed on the left side of the plane. In some situations in this airport, I've placed them on the right or on both sides, which is definitely something I didn't realise when creating them, and I'll see if I can update this for the final video. Okay, so back to the aircraft stands. So there's a few more of my assets we can use here to make them a bit more unique. So first up, there are these positioning markers to place down. Position these in the same place I'm doing. And then there's a net lane line that's connected to this decal. And I can run this down just past the outside of the stand. Sometimes these lines might have different distances or even curved lines, and it had to be a net lane in the end. At the end, there's like a yellow box you can place, and then on top of that, I'll just add the number of the stand. So I'm just going to start here from 100 and count up. I kind of have no idea on the total number of aircraft stands I'll have by the end. I'll just kind of get them all complete. So these are some of Jay's new assets, blast fences, which are commonly red and white alternating colours. These are like a safety device from a jet engine and exhaust. You can imagine how hot the air would be behind an aircraft which is about to take off. So another one of Jay's assets is for these aircraft hangars. So it is actually just one small section, kind of like we did with the LA River, but once combined with the line tool, you can create hangars just to any length you want. Another fairly unique element we can add into the airport. And all of this area needs now is just a bit of detailing, some stains and props and things like that, and it's pretty much good to go. On the other side will be a cargo airport. At the moment I'm building this all non-functional, but you'll see by the end of the LAX build, thanks to StarQ, this will all eventually be functional. The city will be importing and exporting goods from this location, which is pretty cool. And again, I'm just going to fly through this quickly for you. It's very similar processes to what I've covered already. And finally, there's this area here, which again, looking at LAX, it looks pretty admin-y, kind of like a maintenance area. There's some warehouses, some office buildings, lots of car parks, and even these oil tanks for refueling planes. This is all pretty standard industrial type stuff, so I'll leave you now for a time lapse as I get this all built out. Cool, so for the final part of the episode, this is a fairly recent addition actually, but I'm going to include it in this video as it's kind of part of the Runways and Taxiways, even though it was done much later. and it's something I had been meaning to do, but I hadn't quite got round to it before. So earlier I mentioned there's been a lot of inspiration for airports recently on YouTube. Well, one airport build by RU Channel, a Chinese Cities Skylines 2 player, who I thought did a beautiful job on his airport. I saw him adding these vertical signs to these vanilla props using right everywhere. I thought they came out great, and so I decided to follow his technique for the signs too. So these first ones are runway distance signs. They let the pilot know how far in meters is left until the end of the runway, so the numbers go up the further away you are. And you can see I've made them double-sided too, and will count the opposite way on the reverse. Now I'm not going to explain how to use right everywhere on this video. I've recently made a whole video to explain how to use this mod, so if you haven't watched that you can go back and do that. And I've also added emissive properties to the sign, so they'll glow at night time. This is hugely important of course for the pilots. These signs are positioned on the intersection between the taxiway and the runway. The A is the taxiway number. In the red background, the numbers 7 and 25, these are the runway. The intersections between two taxiways will be slightly different. The E on the black background and the yellow border. This is the taxiway you are currently located on. And then the taxiway signposts on the yellow background with the arrows. These are the taxiways you will travel onto for those directions. Any signposts which go to the left will be to the left of the black background part, and any to the right will be on the right of the black background part. These signs are also illuminated at night time, especially with that yellow background, just look so good and is so noticeable, really a great addition to the airport, and especially so late on in the build. So I'm glad to have found inspiration through RU's build. You can make sure to check out his airport video too. The only issue is this actually snowballed into way more work than originally anticipated. I easily spent like an entire day just adding in all of these signs, which has kind of been the case throughout this entire episode. It's really hard to show just how much work it has taken just to get to this point. And we haven't even added in any of the main terminal yet, which is pretty mad, but that's something to look forward to in future videos over the next few weeks. That's mostly it for today's build. The runways and taxiways are looking so good now and so detailed. And I don't really think we're missing hardly anything now to kind of how you would expect them to look in real life. I hope there's been some inspiration for you so far on both how to use my assets and how to create realistic runways and taxiways. I'm really looking forward now to seeing how other people use these assets and implement them into their own airports. So make sure to go and grab them off PDX Mods. And there's still so much more to do in finishing up and completing LAX over the next 2 videos. The inner loop and terminal come out so good in the end and absolutely packed with detail and so lively and functional too. As I mentioned at the start of the video, please like, comment and be subscribed to be a part of the giveaway for these signed prints, and I'll announce the winner in part 3 of this build. A lot of work has gone into this build, so any engagement is really appreciated. So I hope you enjoyed the build, and I'll catch you all again soon for part 2 of LAX.